Either in the McNair Center on the campus of Northwood University in Midland, Michigan, or via live streaming, welcome all. I'm Dr. Kristen Stahauer, Academic Vice President and Provost, and I am thrilled to be welcoming you here today, and most importantly, celebrating the research work of our faculty members and our doctoral students. This is something that is of primary importance in our strategic plan. And we've always been an institution focused on teaching and experiential learning, and we will continue to do that for our next 50 years or 60 years and beyond. And at the same time, we're working to celebrate and lift up the fine work that our faculty members, our colleagues, our students are doing. So thanks for joining us again. And we really did call it out in our strategic plan to emphasize this even more and foster even more. And we have a research recognition and rewards committee as well, chaired by Dr. Todd Thomas, and he's in the back. And we recognize the published and research that is done by our faculty members or staff members, and just to get that Northwood name out there and to recognize your fine work. This is our third annual Research and Scholarly Activities Symposium, and we're celebrating you, our faculty members, and our staff, and we really are just thrilled to be here. So we will move right ahead, and I look forward to introducing our first speaker this afternoon, who's Dr. Anne Marie Hoiker, Associate Professor and Cybersecurity Program Lead. During the COVID-19 pandemic, mobile and e-learning became the norm, but not necessarily by choice. We know that. We did the pivot, right? Dr. Hoiker's research compares attitudes pre-pandemic to those held by students and faculty members post-pandemic. In particular, her work examines how playfulness and enjoyment can motivate user acceptance and enthusiasm for mobile learning. And to share more on this topic, please welcome our colleague, Dr. Anne Marie Hoiker.
Wow, this podium is a lot taller than I am. Let's see. Are my slides going to come up? Okay, they're not on the screen yet, that's why. All right. I actually have to correct, I don't know if I put it in there wrong. This is actually a look at mid-pandemic, because as researchers, we want to take the temperature as we go along. I talked to my research partner when we started this, and I said, we actually have a multi-level study here going on, so we actually have a whole chain of events that we're going to be tracking. So you know me, I am your colleague. Don't you love my little avatar? It's my way of staying on the cutting edge. And my research partner is Nalima Bhatnagar. We met in our PhD program. Great place to meet great people. You get good partners mainly because you inspire each other. Her strength, I think, is data analysis, and mine is figuring out what data to collect. So match made in research heaven. So I'm going to give you a few definitions, tell you about the model for our studies, how we did it, and where we're going from here. Here's our background and definitions. You have e-learning and you have m-learning. Are they the same thing? Well, e-learning is anything that uses digital electronic tools and media. So e-learning partially takes place in the classroom because we're using those digital tools. But m-learning is specifically looking at the use of mobile devices and wireless technologies for learning, training, and teaching. In other words, learning on the run. Because everybody likes being wherever they are and being able to connect in. It's one of the most powerful things that happen to us with the internet. So if you look at traditional learning models, you have your traditional learning, and then you have distance learning, because distant learning had been around since they were doing it with, writing letters back and forth, correspondence, courses, as they used to say. Now that turned into electronic learning, which was then supported by computers, but all that filtered down into mobile learning and all those technologies and all those philosophies that we learned when we were setting up our traditional learning. We have to bring those good lessons to e-learning and then to mobile learning. Previously, this is my colleague, my research partner, her dissertation took a snapshot of what attitudes were before the pandemic. We got into the pandemic and she says, we were discussing different research alternatives. And I said, Nalima, you have a baseline in your dissertation. We need to look at this mid-pandemic because there's been a shift in how everything is. And it was funny, it took me saying that to her for her to realize what she had there. And I said, it's gold, data gold. So we get excited about that stuff. So quarantine. We went from this to this. Yep. And that happened in a matter of, at most, a week. Go home for spring break and all of a sudden your classrooms are empty. It was a shock to the staff, to the students, and to the world that this was our new normal. So we looked at this change and how it affected learning. So we have Nalima's doctoral dissertation that has our pre-pandemic baseline. Then we expanded because now it's affecting a much larger group. She was looking more at teachers. I said the students are equally invested, and of course, we all know our students are the other half of the learning equation. And then we took the mid-pandemic just to see where people were. But we have planned a post-pandemic. In fact, we are revving up for that right now, and I'll be talking to Mark about that. Our IRB is already approved through Pittsburgh, and then we want to expand that to both schools. But what are the attitudes now? Our research questions. What makes people enjoy learning, and how is it being used? There's a silver lining in everything, right? During COVID-19, didn't we learn to do a whole lot of things we never thought we could do? Zoom went from this kind of like startup that barely worked to now a secure encrypted platform with probably 100 times the amount of features that it had before. People will say, can you use a computer to make a video call? Almost anybody can, and particularly from their phones. So there is much that was not good about the pandemic, but there were good things that came out of it. And I love the fact that you can get almost anything delivered these days. So our model for the study. Huang put out this idea that personal innovativeness will make you more inclined to like mobile learning. But there are some other motivators. And in particular, they're looking at hedonistic, the pleasure motivators. Do you enjoy it? Is it playful? And is it useful? Based on all those things, we came out with their motivation to use mobile information systems or learning. So the perceived enjoyment, some definitions for you. This is what we think enjoyment is. I never thought I'd have to explain what enjoyment was, but should be pretty obvious. Perceived usefulness. Now I find this interesting. There's perceived usefulness, and then there's actual usefulness. And I have another study, which Patty and I have talked about, talking about the technology acceptance model versus the security acceptance model, and in that TAM is not SAM, because if you're going to accept something, shouldn't you make it actually more easy instead of making people think it's easy? But right here, we're looking at perception. Perceived playfulness. Do they like it? And are they willing to try new things? So we put out a survey. Yes, it went on a mobile platform. It is mobile learning after all. They go to the survey, they fill out the survey. It's tailored to both students and educators, and it replicated those original questions, but added usability questions, because we knew during the pandemic, usefulness and usability were a whole other thing we needed to start tracking. What did we get? Well, basically, if you're personally innovative, that will make you think it's useful. If you're innovative, you will enjoy it more. And if you're innovative, you have a higher level of perceived playfulness. On the other hand, if you perceive usability, you'll use the system. And if you enjoy it, you'll use the system. So our procedure, we had the email, the landing page you saw right there on that phone. We closed our data collection, and then we did data analysis using PLS SIEM. In our collection, we got demographics. We looked at their attitudes, and then we used a standardized tool that collects usability. This is 15 to 18 years old. It's that 10 questions. Do you think you could use? You've seen this. I recognize it almost anywhere these days. And it's the 10 questions that give you a measure of whether people think it's useful or not. But it's still perceived, not actual. When we looked at faculty, not a lot of difference between the two. But when we got to the structural, we were looking at the that the PI did not appear in the results at all. Looking at the students, fairly consistent in our data analysis. Our two values made sense, and we actually are dealing with a small sample. Why do we have to deal with a small sample? We wanted to make sure we got this data point and had to move fast enough so, the pandemic wouldn't stop before we had a chance to collect our data. So, pre-pandemic faculty, mid-pandemic faculty, and mid-pandemic student. One of our hypotheses was rejected, that personal perceived usefulness would continue to motivate them to use the mobile information systems. In other words, because of the wider use of during the pandemic, where we had people who were not necessarily personally innovative and not choosing that mode, that they were saying, I don't care if it's useful, I still hate it. Then we look at, does enjoyment make any difference? It says no. And that it's playful. No, they're saying no, which kind of like seems counterintuitive. But when you ask them, what would you rather do? Something that's playful and enjoyable versus standard, read the lecture, listen to the lecture, take the quiz, they always select the game over that. So we think we need to refine that. Looking at the students, that was faculty. I'm sorry, that was faculty. Faculty says, no, it doesn't make any difference if enjoyable. The students say, yes, it does. So a flip on that. But playfulness, they rejected. Interesting. So the other thing on usability, the techno stress of having to switch so many things about your life and make it all online created great anxiety, and at a certain point, being totally overwhelmed with the tools. Now, how am I doing it today? So usability was not perceived. In other words, they said it's some of the worst scores of usability I've ever seen. Future research. We'd like to expand other institutions. We're looking at other theories to look at those things that we're not getting quite we're getting very different answers between the students and the faculty. That the faculty says, no, it's not important whether it's playful or enjoyable, but the students definitely are saying that is important. And we need to look at the techno stress. In other words, we've added questions that say, did you have a choice about using mobile learning, or was that your only choice? And now that you have a choice, we're moving into our post-pandemic survey. What would your choice be now? So that's me and Nalima. And questions? This is, as I said, a series of studies. And so when I say we're surveying faculty, I'm looking at you. I'm looking at our students, because we want the best mobile learning that we can. And we want to be able to know what makes it good. So, that's it. No, I got one question out there.
Did you find any research which looked outside of the academic community, at the workplace?
We did not see much research at the workplace. It's particularly mid-pandemic. There were a lot of studies in schools, but everybody else, in fact, we were watching these in that first year that the pandemic started. It was all they could do to get information out there fast enough. So, but the work, for the most part, businesses were like, we're just focused on staying open.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's great. Well, that was a wonderful example of how to structure research too. And I'm sure our doctoral students were taking note of that, how you operationalize it from idea to research question, identified the constructs and operationalized them. And that was wonderful and fascinating too. So a lot of opportunities for that to be replicated. Well, next up, we are going to hear from Jason Story, and he is a student in Northwood University's Doctor of Business Administration program, and he will be sharing an overview of his dissertation. It's quite a fascinating model that he's putting together, synthesizing multiple theoretical perspectives on some topics that are really important to all of us every day. He explores the relationship between organizations and their people, and how synthesizing and contextualizing existing models into practical, actionable exercises can potentially result in positive interventions to make things better for everybody. So please join me in welcoming our doctoral student, Jason Story.
You know, when you put it that way, it sounds quite ambitious for a student. So let's see what I could do. So some of my education comes from psychology or organizational psychology, organizational leadership, and now obviously business administration. And my work experience has been heavily reliant on workplace or workforce development, organizational development. And as I was going through this work and continue to go through this work, I find myself continually listening to problems or opportunities in every workplace. An individual, a department, or an organization is trying to get something to happen, or they're trying to keep something from happening. It's like, well, that's not overly profound. It's like obviously stating what's known to us all. But in listening to these situations and these people, I'm trying to figure out where we are. So you're listening and you're trying to diagnose where the issue is. So if you go to a doctor, for instance, you just say, I hurt. It's like, well, that's not too helpful. Like, can you tell me more? If we can localize that to my knee hurts after I run, now we've sort of created a frame. And that's sort of implicitly what I was doing, as I've been doing this work for some time. And I started to try to look for the linkages that would be encompassing, because I didn't find that there was one. So I was studying all sorts of organizational development literature, all sorts of psychological literature, and they all have very, very helpful literature and research that I can borrow. But one of the things that wasn't adding up for me was how they connect. So I said, well, either this is a really good idea because I haven't seen anybody do this, or this is a really bad idea, and that's why no one has done it. But I don't really have anything better to do than to find out. So as Dr. Stahauer said, there's a lot of fantastic models out there, but I was wondering if I might be able to think of something that is superordinate, that sort of unites them, or something that could unite them. Some of the people that I've studied, Jean Piaget or Jacques Panksepp, some of the work of Latham and Locke and Bandura and Victor Vroom. And I've also studied some of the things historically, so theology and ontology and existentialism and some of the things that are old. So what I'm trying to do is look for consilience between scientific research in the modern day workplace, which things that have been indicated to be true for long periods of time, with the idea that if I can find threads, then I might be on something that's of truth. So I'm very excited to share this because this is the first time I've done so in an academic setting. And I stare at this in my office for a long time. I've had this particular model for years. And the forward button. So this is what I've come up with. So to me, this is a continuum for sort of universal truths, something that's true to everyone all the time. And maybe there's some way to poke at that. And I'm hoping that people do, so that I can make my work stronger and better. But we can take a look at this here in the color gradients. So usually when we take a look at the existing literature on leadership, it talks about casting mission and vision and strategic plan and culture and things of that nature, and inculcating that or getting that throughout the organization. And those are very helpful. If we take a look at workforce and workplace development, usually that's about job design and work design and performance management. And then the psychologists and sociologists, they really like to talk about motivation and competence and beliefs. And all those things are fractured. but to bring them into a whole in order to, like I said in the first point, get things to happen or prevent things from happening. To me, this helps unite all of those things. So a little bit about how this exists currently is that this blue gradient would be things that, well, I have my fancy academic literature here, psychological precursors to enactment. That's the best I can do now, but it's like what you think and feel, said more practically. And I appreciate Dr. Lyman for saying we need functional definitions here. In this orange to red gradient here, those are a gradient of enactment. So we see something very simple, action, such as maybe clutching my fingers together, a task, maybe formulating a sentence, to this procedure of giving a presentation, to this project of trying to amass a body of work that I could be of help to the world. But then we start to think of this green gradient here, and those are valuative projections, or it's what you're reaching for. What I'm reaching for is to be of help to the world, especially in the workplace. So these things cascade into higher and higher levels. Maybe we could say at the top here, well, what are we defining construct as? And I took a notice. Next time I'm definitely going to have slides that give my definitions. Maybe construct can equate to the mission of an organization. And an abstract in this case could equate to the guiding principles or the values of that organization. And then that follows itself into something that's a bit more tangible, a stated vision for success. And then underneath that, we work our way into goals and objectives, things that become, again, they're something of reach, but they're a little bit closer. And then we take these broader distal goals, and then we turn them into proximal things, such as a project. Then we work that into things that we can actually work our way through, going down into procedures. And that might be a sequence of things. And then we start to get into like what we're doing in the present moment. As we work our way backwards into the blue area, we're talking about the things that happen in our minds and our hearts and maybe our souls prior to even taking action. So the idea would be is if I'm listening to an organization, a department, or an individual talk about what it is that they're after and how they're trying to get more of it, or what it is that they're avoiding, I'd like to build out an instrument that has the ability to measure each of these domains and then to be able to perhaps fill each bucket. You would see if somebody was hyper clear on perhaps the vision of their workplace, it's been clearly stated, but they're really not too sure what to do today in this task and action section, that would be revealed as such. And then that would help look for a measurement between either the individual and also leader of, well, where do we have a high resolution view on where we need to be leading and where are we lagging? With the idea that, well, this doesn't say perfection in the center for a reason, but the idea is that the higher level of understanding and the higher level of interpretation of each of these domains, the higher the likelihood of optimization or being able to increase what it is that we're after. I really am looking for something that is sort of applicable in all settings to all people all the time. And I know it's quite the undertaking, but I'm really not interested in anything less. I need to think about what the research design does as far as cutting things off and what it includes and what it precludes. But I feel like I'm onto something, and I feel like this program is very helpful for me to be able to increase my understanding, and right here, right now, being able to increase my ability to articulate what it is that I'm up to, rather than just thinking about it all the time in my own head. I put this to practice, and through my lived experiences, this is quite effective in being able to help even if this is just a visceral reaction of, if you take a look at this model, put in whatever you'd like, this optimization quotient could be, what do you want? People sort of have this ability to sort of look very quickly to say, oh, that's what I'm really struggling with. I have the competency and I've decided, but as I get to work, the work is just not fluid in it. Maybe this technological stress that runs into our way, or perhaps we understand the mission, but we really don't know how to deliver it. Or perhaps we have an issue in training and the knowledge, skills, and abilities to act. So the issue is competence. And I'm very, very curious to hear what people think, because again, this is the first time that I've been here. I'd like to leave a minute if I have it for questions, or I'll be standing next to the cookies afterward. But I'm very grateful for the time, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. And that should prove to be a very fascinating model. And it sounds like it has practical applications on its horizon too. So thank you for that. And yes, we do have a reception afterwards. And I imagine in the interest of time, some of you are withholding your questions, but during the reception, we encourage you to speak with the presenters on their research and ask the questions we know you probably have. So our next speaker is Dr. Alex Tokarev, our Associate Professor for Economics and Philosophy. And this semester, he gave several interviews to RTVI, an independent network that broadcasts in over 80 countries via cable. Most of their viewers are in the United States, Israel, and Germany. They don't broadcast in Russia, and it's important to note that they're not associated with RT, another broadcasting entity. During one of those interviews, he was asked to comment on experts in the New York Times predicting that Russia's natural resources will not allow it to collapse and stop its aggression as the West hopes. The conversation in that interview centered on how supply chains changed for the Russian economy, as well as how difficult it is for European economies to adapt to the absence of this partner. Today, Dr. Tokarev will discuss the effects of Western sanctions on Russia, the role of Turkey, and how the war is having an impact in the Balkans, where he grew up. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Alex Tokarev.
Some of you probably remember my email from mid-February 2022, inviting Northwood family members to take a stand in support of peace in Ukraine, and also of the rights of the Canadian truckers who at that time were peacefully protesting the tyrannical COVID orders of their prime minister. Just hours after our event at the church building, Putin soldiers invaded their neighbor's homeland. The American government and our NATO allies reacted, as we always do, by imposing sanctions on the aggressor. As always, those sanctions inflicted a lot of pain on millions of innocent civilians and also created profitable opportunities for people connected to the very regime that we wanted punished. What sanctions can't do is bring us closer to peace in Ukraine. That is a lesson we should have learned from our failed attempts to use economic pressures to change the regimes in Cuba, in North Korea, and Iran. No one knows the true number of victims in the war in Ukraine. The best estimate that I found was about 1,000 dead or injured people per day, and we got used to that. Blood and sanctions seem not to be able to stop this. Why? Well, think of Russia's leaders. Those people are used to losing millions in wars while the rest of their people live in primitive conditions. Like Stalin, Putin thrives on hardships that he can blame on foreign or domestic enemies. Neither the casualties nor the recession is making their president any less popular. On the contrary, Western sanctions make most of the people in that country more jingoistic. Putin was just re-elected for the nth time, and this time he did it with more votes than he ever got in the past. During the Cold War, I grew up in Bulgaria, and I believe that the Soviet economy was second to none. By the late 1980s, it turned out to be a house of cards. Today's GDP of Russia, of the Russian Federation, is smaller than that of Texas. Wars, as we know, are very expensive. And Putin's regime is very heavily reliant on the export of minerals. When Biden and the European Union governments imposed the sanctions, they naively assumed that those measures would quickly bankrupt the enemy's economy and bring the invasion to a halt. The math did not work. Russia still sells billions of barrels annually. Western politicians forgot that we live in a global economy. America, Europe, Canada, and Japan hit Russia with tens of thousands of restrictions. Putin's oligarchs quickly reoriented their exporting businesses to the Chinese and the Indian markets. And those happen to have 4 times as many consumers as the US and the EU combined. Whatever goods and military technologies Putin can no longer buy from the West, he acquires from neighboring Caucasus, Central Asian republics, Erdogan's Turkey, and Xi's China. Semiconductor exports from Hong Kong to Russia doubled. Total exports from Kyrgyzstan tripled. Exports of microchips from the United Arab Emirates increased by a factor of 15 in just the first year of the war. During the same period, the country increased its gold imports from Russia by a factor of 60, a $4.3 billion. That can buy a lot of bullets for Putin. Kim's North Korea signed a lucrative deal with Putin to export weapons for the war in Ukraine. Now, after the Bolsheviks took power in Russia, their people spent the next 70 years inventing and perfecting ways to go around political obstacles. Banking restrictions gave the Russians an incentive to move their money to Azerbaijan, Cyprus, Greece, Georgia, Israel, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and many other destinations. In Armenia alone, transfers reached 17% of the country's GDP. So I invite you to come to Bulgaria this summer with me, and you'll be amazed at all the properties in the capital, Sofia, and especially at the beautiful Black Sea resorts that belong to Putin's compatriots. Now, as Dr. Stehauer mentioned, my biggest personal concern is for the Balkans. I grew up in Bulgaria, and people were very disturbed 2 years ago when I visited. The war was raging just, 300 miles, I'd say, away from our borders. But then I went to the beach and I noticed how thousands of Russians and thousands of Ukrainians were just enjoying the summer break they were taking. And today, barely anyone speaks about the war in Ukraine, in Bulgaria. People get used to all kinds of things. To us, imagine if, let's say, Chicago was an independent city. Yeah, you wish. If Chicago was independent of the United States and it was invaded by Chinese troops. And here in Midland, Michigan, just 5 hours away by car, we stopped paying any attention to what was happening in that conflict. So for the Balkans, by far the most important player during this conflict is Turkey. The country, I'm sure you know, is run by a regime which resembles Putin's in some ways. Turkey is a member of NATO, supposedly an ally of the United States, but it also has no chance of joining the European Union anytime soon, something they desire a lot, but it will not happen, in my opinion. But that's why Erdogan is trying to maximize his own power by balancing between the political demands of Biden and the economic benefits from his connections to Putin and Xi. When the war began, Turkey condemned Russia's aggression. Erdogan will not recognize Putin's annexations of Ukrainian territories in the east and the south of the country, including Crimea. Ankara negotiates the exchange of prisoners. Erdogan will not let Putin's navy cross between the Mediterranean and the Black Seas. Turkey also blocks the Russian Air Force from its airspace. Erdogan provides some military aid to the Ukrainians and helps them to make drones for their defensive operations. Turkey's infrastructure has also been critical for Bulgaria. It allows my country and other European countries to replace natural gas supplies from Russia with alternatives from Azerbaijan. Erdogan imposed financial restrictions on Moscow. However, Putin's oligarchs are doing business as usual in Turkey. Many more Russians keep going to the country's Mediterranean resorts now that they face difficulties with visas in other places. Turkish exports of chemicals and semiconductors used in weapon systems to Russia have grown. Turkey's military also heavily relies on Russian air defense systems, fighter aircraft, and submarines. Turkey also pursues full membership in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, led by Russia and China, and that makes the country the weakest link in NATO. Erdogan, you surely have heard in the news, recently used political extortion to persecute its Kurdish minority members who live in Europe when Sweden and Finland sought to join NATO. Now, to fully explain the Balkans, it's a big mess with many, many centuries of history. To fully explain the problems today, I should give you a history lesson about the region, like Putin, for example, tried to do so about the lands north of the Black Sea in his interview to Tucker Carlson. Unfortunately, I only have 10 minutes, and I can't teach you much in less than 10 hours. So before I take any questions, I'll finish with this. When the Soviet Union disintegrated after the fall of the Berlin Wall, the Russians felt humiliated. They lost the Cold War, they lost most of their empire, and they lost the status of a global superpower. That is why they elected Putin, who promised to make Russia great again by opposing American imperialism. Since the Balkan War of 1877-78, when Bulgaria was restored, the Third Bulgarian Kingdom, Moscow has only had one reliable partner, one ally in all of Europe, and probably in all of the world, and that has been Serbia. 120 years after this war, Clinton bombed Belgrade. This artificial federation of Yugoslavia fell apart, and some of the republics joined NATO. The Serbian dictator was convicted for war crimes. Now, Russians should have blamed America's second worst president, Woodrow Wilson, who forced many longtime enemies to share a government after World War I. I'm talking about the creation of Yugoslavia under his leadership. Instead, the Russians saw this as a dress rehearsal of America's plan to use dissenters like Navalny and separatists like the Chechens to put an end to the Russian Federation. Now, my prediction is that when Trump returns to the White House next year, he'll twist Zelensky's arms to agree to a land for peace kind of treaty. No one wants to see the second largest nuclear power destabilized by a military coup and humiliated by NATO. Now, I can't predict how this will affect the world 20 years from now. But for the time being, that seems to be the only way to end the bloodbath in Ukraine, to protect the Balkans, and to allow us to focus on the real threat, and that is the Chinese Communist Party. Okay, thank you. You have to ask me questions now because my son has a birthday, and I'll pass on the cookies. There's chocolate cake at home waiting, so I'll be out of here in a few minutes. Okay, you can email me, and I'll be glad to talk more.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much.
Of course, thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Takara, for shedding a personal perspective on some very timely issues. And certainly follow the money is one of the themes that came out of that. And really and also I heard a prediction for who's going to win the election too in the fall. We'll see how that turns out. And, but really dramatic and long-standing, centuries-long sources of conflict in your homeland. So thank you for sharing your personal and also professional perspective. Next, we welcome Dr. Kevin McCormick, Associate Professor of Operations and Supply Chain Management. His research focuses and addresses how many organizations today are attempting to increase the use of analytics in decision-making. Analytics have been shown to improve business performance in almost every economic segment, indicating there are incentives driving this effort. So he asks, how do analytics involve individuals within organizations? What factors influence the use of analytical models? His research has attempted to define and test the factors in this process and to answer questions on how to help an organization effectively increase its analytical decision-making, which improves decision quality, and I love this, and reduces regret. So with that, we're very interested in learning more about this topic. Please welcome Dr. Kevin McCormick.
Thanks, Kristen. We started this research project in 2009 with my global research team, and I ran a couple businesses back then. And I joined Northwood in 2012, adjunct, working with Dr. Henschel to develop the supply chain program. And I told him at the time, I said, you got to put analytics into the program because it is the future. This is what's going to make things happen. And he said, well, go talk to the math department. I said, okay, I'll go talk to the math department. So I developed this kind of mad association with a math teacher that then retired in a couple months. And I'm sitting there with my hands empty going, okay, what do I do now? I'm doing the supply chain program. I need analytics. So a couple of years evolved, and we got an analytics pilot going, and we started this. And my global research team had proceeded with our research project to define what makes companies benefit from analytics. How did they do it? Because a lot of people don't know how to use analytical tools, and they don't know about data. They don't care about data. They do intuitive decision making. So we started doing this research with my research partners and defined analytic orientation and analytic capabilities, tested these measures, and statistically proved that you can make better decisions if you are analytically capable and you're analytically oriented, meaning you think data is important. I'll read some of the constructs here, some of the measures. I think that data is very important to my life. I make fact-based important decisions. I often use analytical models. These are measures we developed and statistically proved that they improve decision-making and reduce regret, which we thought was I thought I forced my team to put it in the model because my wife always makes decisions and she always regrets, even though she makes the best decisions I've ever seen. But we spend days after any decision about, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that. So I said, I got to put this in the research. So it's in here. Okay, so what did we do? We started an intro to data science course, and the school went off and started the analytics program here as a major. And I focused on the intro to data science, which I consider analytical teaching of the unwashed, I guess if you excuse that expression, people that aren't normally in an analytics course, they've taken one semester of stats, they're finance majors, accounting majors, supply chain majors are required to take it. And they're not normally the ones you see in an analytics class. I said, you folks have to learn about analytics, how to do it, why it's important. So we structured this class, we put in experiential learning exercises. Marcos Oliveira, who was a professor here at the time, developed video after video after video after demos to use SAS Jump, and Power BI became important. So all these things became incorporated. We started measuring the results. So in 2018, we started having the students fill out a survey at the end of class. And so that's been 6 years now. So we've got 6 years of data, and I want to share that data with you. So okay. The first, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but these are the analytic orientation things, opinions. We asked them, what do you think basically this class has done for you? Have you strongly increased or neither increased or decreased or strongly decreased your feeling about this? I think the data is very important to my life. You can see these people, the folks in here, really think the class strongly increased or increased their feelings about data. Now, you can say, what are you doing with feelings? You're an engineer, you're an analytics person, you don't have feelings. But what we found in our global research, that all these things revolve around if you think it's important or not. So these are all the results we had: increased, strongly increased. I make important decisions using analysis of data, on and on. All the results have been increased and strongly increased all the way down. And we ask each student to fill out an assessment at the end of class, what they started with, objectives, what they ended with, and what do they think about the class. And we've analyzed using text analytics all of this data over 6 years and come out with some dramatic conclusions that their decision making has all improved. I'll get to that point quickly. I generally make good, important decisions. It increased their feelings about their own decisions, which is important. If you're graduating business management leaders, you want them to have a little confidence in their decisions. And do they often reverse course? It decreased. They said, no, I'm confident in my decisions and I don't reverse course. And I have confidence in my important decisions. And here's my wife's construct. I am often concerned about my important decisions. I have hangover after they are made, and that decreased. So I feel vindicated. My research team told me I'm always right. And my wife declines to participate in this. She says I'm a misogynist and I shouldn't include her in the research. So, okay. So I just want to say it's been really rewarding to influence all of these students like this. And every one of them has said, this is probably the best class I've ever taken, not because you're a great teacher, but because the material is so useful. And I had a student tell me today, I just got a summer internship because I learned Power BI. I'm going, that's great, success. So that's all I got. Thanks.
All right, a decision hangover, that's a new one. But once again, we saw the importance of operationalizing constructs, the research design, pre-test, post-test, and the impact of the kinds of instruction that you're providing. Thank you for that, Dr. McCormick. Our next presenter is another doctoral student. Her name is Juan Cajel Floja Due, and she is focused on how the small city of the future can eradicate poverty and is inspired by her dream to change the world. Please join me in welcoming Schajuan Cajel Flora Duey.
I want to thank Northwood University for this opportunity. And I want also to thank my husband who came here with me tonight. And my work is about the city of the future. And my goal is to stop poverty in the world. For centuries, people have been dreaming of perfection without poverty and suffering. In so many religions, people expect a better city. In Christianity, the book of Revelation talks about the New Jerusalem, a perfect city glowing with splendor. In Islam, this city is described with unimaginable luxury. In Buddhism, they have the concept of pure land. For so many years on earth, we struggle with poverty and imperfect city. The revolution of smart city of the future can be a solution. Also, so many developed countries encounter a problem with immigration. The poor countries, by lack of good infrastructure, good governance, encounter poverty. And they want to come to the developed country to find a better life. But sometimes the developed countries are overwhelmed by all this immigration. And the reality is that the world has enough resources to stop poverty worldwide. And also, again, my solution is to create sustainable smart city of the future to stop poverty and also this problem of immigration. Because if we build the smart city in all these countries, we will not fight the problem of immigration because all of these countries will be also rich and everybody will be satisfied. And in our world, poverty remains one of the most significant social issues. Innovation can be the way to reduce poverty. The sustainable cities of the future result of innovation that can reduce poverty. And you can't talk about innovation without talking about Elon Musk. Elon Musk is one of the most important activists on earth who tried to reduce poverty in the world. He used the power of technology to tackle some challenges like poverty. He always tried to create something new to improve the quality of human life. And my dream is to be a little bit like him. I want to be one of the most important activists in the world to stop poverty. At the end of my research work, I hope I will contribute to eradicate poverty in the world by understanding how the cities of the future can eradicate poverty. The purpose of my work is to do a research on how people are satisfied in the common city we have right now. And when I will do this study, I will try to see what is important that we can keep in the city that we have right now and what is not important that we can change. And this will help me to build the city of the future. And how I will organize my work, I will do a quantitative part. I will do a satisfaction study where I will do like an interview of the satisfaction of people in 3 cities in each continent. And I will know what people really need in the city and what people really need to change or what they want to see an amelioration in. And the second part of my work will be like the definition of the city of the future. What you think when people talk about the city of the future, I think about sustainability, a city who is able to provide for its population without so many resources waste, and that will be available to everybody. The third part of my work will be a qualitative study of the city of the future. We will try to define, give a definition, and know what we really need in the city of the future. The fourth part is a quantitative study of the city of the future. And this is some question I ask myself. To build a city of the future, did the government will destroy some old city to build a city of the future? And if the government have to destroy some city, they need to pay something to the people who live in that city and be able to provide for them when they build the city of the future. And sometimes also, for example, in Africa, we have some big deserts. We can use this desert to create the city of the future. And the population, what are the advantages of the city of the future for the population and the inconvenient? Because some people project that in the city of the future, the population will not have that freedom. And we need to work on that. If we want to create a city of the future, we need to make sure that people keep their freedom. And the government, that's the role of the government. What is the advantage and the inconvenience of the city of the future for the government? And the government need to make sure that they are not so controlling, because people need their freedom. And the feasibility of the city of the future, what we need to build the city of the future. Innovation, we need a lot of innovation. We will use some intelligent tool and all that stuff. And the architect innovation, we need to, the city of the future is supposed to be a beautiful city. That's when people see this city, they are already happy to live in that city. And this city needs to be sustainable also. And the economic feasibility of the city of the future, how much money we need to build city of the future in all the country of the world to stop poverty. And we will try also to give some example of the city of the future. We have some city of the future in the Emirates Arab. We also project to build some city of the future in United States. I think we have already a 400 billion project of city of the future in United States. And all these countries try to build the city of the future, and I hope that they will. And what are my findings? My findings are that poverty is a reality in our world. We have so much poverty all over the world, and we need to do something to stop that, because there is no reason on earth for us to have poverty, because we have the resources, we have the technology, we have everything. And we need to work with our government to be less corrupt, to think about people and stop poverty. And we need also to do some work, some innovation in the sustainable energy world, the electric supply system, the smart metering, the distributed generator, intelligent grid. And we have so many new things we need to integrate for the city of the future. And the United Nations also need to work more, because I think that they need to take some real action to stop poverty in the world. And the financial reality, Deloitte in 2016 said that to build something like that will be very costly. And they say that it will be around $1 trillion to build a city who can stop poverty all over the world. But if they use that money to build it, it will be benefit for the government, for the corporation, for the residents, and also for the world population. And these are my references, and thank you so much. And I hope that by the end of my study, I will help to stop poverty in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Spanquan. And that is an inspiring and big vision that you have. So thank you and good luck with your research. And our final presenter this evening is Dr. Stacy Tetloff, Associate Academic Dean. And we are very interested in hearing about her qualitative study that explored the perspectives of industry experts who are also serving as adjunct faculty members in higher education. The study focused on how writing in the disciplines supports students' development of professional writing skills. The research was driven by Dr. Tetloff's interests in the ways in which academic writing can create opportunity for students to develop disciplinary discourse and written communication skills for career preparedness. The conclusions and recommendations were drawn from the insights that participants shared about their own professional and academic writing experiences, their instructional preparedness and training, and the institutional support they received. To share more on this topic, please welcome Dr. Tetloff.
So it was good timing to present on my research because I'm still having dissertation nightmares, so the content is very fresh. So today I just wanted to walk you through a quick overview, sort of the journalist questions, who, what, where, when, and why, and how, though not quite in that order. So I'll jump right in. The why this interested me so much is because continually in employer surveys, communication skills of graduates, of undergraduates entering the workforce rank in the top 5, right? And employers are also identifying that there's a gap in that. Graduates are just not prepared to do so. There's also an increasing number of adjunct faculty teaching in higher education, partially because of the higher education model, but that's something that also benefits institutions, particularly when industry experts take on roles as adjunct faculty and can bring their industry expertise into the classroom. This was also important, though, to explore the gap then that exists. So all adjunct faculty, I would say, particularly industry expert adjunct faculty who have specific barriers in terms of time and resources, institutions just don't necessarily put supports in place that meet the needs of that particular group. And so I thought that was important to explore. But why writing in the disciplines specifically? So I get really excited about this, so calm me down if you need to. Writing in the disciplines is a disciplinary literacy strategy. And what it's really doing is helping students learn more than just the definitions that they need in their fields. Writing in the disciplines is helping students, helping learners be doers of the discipline. They can do more than just define the terms. They know what to do with them, right? So I have 2 images here. One is a waiter with a tray and one is a plate of spaghetti. So I decided to use restaurants as my example here. If you've ever worked in a restaurant or eaten in one, maybe you can relate to this. So as a server in a restaurant, if it's your first day and you go into the kitchen and the cook says to you, or an expediter says to you, the spaghetti is 86th. If you can define that, you know that that means there is no more spaghetti, right? If you're walking through the serving station toward the kitchen and you hear someone yell corner, if you can define that, you know that means someone is exiting the kitchen, probably with a very heavy tray, right? Great, you can define them. But if you don't know what to do with it, if you don't know then to communicate to your table that the spaghetti isn't available, and what else would your table like for dinner? You'll have some very angry customers and some very angry line cooks, right? You know that someone's exiting a kitchen if you hear the word corner, but if you don't get out of the way, you're going to get smacked in the face with a tray, right? So writing in the disciplines can help our graduates not get hit in the face when they enter the workforce. They can do more than define terms. They can operate within the discipline. So this was important, industry expert adjunct faculty, those were my participants. So just a quick overview. I sought participants that were in different fields, right? So different industries was important. In case maybe it depended, if someone was in data analytics versus gerontology versus criminal justice, were there different perceptions that would inform? The participants also had varying numbers of institutions that they had worked for in higher education and varying number of years that they had taught. So years taught ranged from 2 to 16, 17, 16, and institutions taught for range from 1 to 7. The what really was the research question. So I was looking at the perspective, so it was important to gather insight from the participants on what they knew about writing in the disciplines, what their understanding was, then how they incorporated strategies in their classrooms, or if they did, to support professional communication skill development. And then also very important to that perspective was what specific experiences of their own were informing the ways in which they taught, right? So academic, professional, and industry, as well as their adjunct faculty roles were important there. So the how, when, and where. This was a basic qualitative study. Again, I was looking for insight into perspective, so it was important that I interviewed. I did that via Zoom between May and July of 2023. I also collected teaching philosophy statements. In both the teaching philosophy statements and interview transcripts, I conducted a thematic analysis to identify codes, patterns, themes, and sub-themes. So really the themes and the sub-themes are the big ahas, right? So I had 3 themes emerge and 8 sub-themes. The 3 main themes were the role of the industry expert in the classroom, the idea of professional apprenticeship, and then industry expertise in writing instruction and what those connections were. But even within the themes and within all of the analysis that I conducted on the transcripts and the teaching philosophy statements, I just wanted to share some of the biggest takeaways I had, the most aha moments. So takeaway number 1, that's me, if you can't tell, with a big stop sign in front of it. I was going to put Dr. Tim and Dr. Stahauer up here too, but I really love my job, so it's just me. And it's not just me personally that they don't want to talk to. Just imagine this says administrator behind it, right? So industry expert adjunct faculty don't want to call me as the associate academic dean or their department chair and say, I messed something up in Blackboard. Or I have a really angry student in my class and I don't know what to do. Who they do want to talk to, though, are their peers, other adjunct faculty, and other full-time faculty as well. So aha, takeaway number 2. If you're too young to know who the gentleman is up there, it's Rodney Dangerfield. And his famous line was, I don't get no respect, right? So it didn't surprise me. In the literature, it's clear adjunct faculty overall don't feel respected in their roles or by the institutions that they work for. What surprised me here was that my participants, or the participants in my study, didn't identify only low pay, nomadic work conditions, lack of resources, or a lack of a welcoming culture at their institutions as reasons, which are well known in the literature. What they did focus more on was that they didn't get respect for their industry expertise by the institutions where they worked, which was interesting. Because a big takeaway, the final big takeaway for me was, as important as the industry expertise was to them, and as important as they knew it was to their role in the classroom, they didn't have any idea how to bring it into the classroom. But they also were not interested in participating in professional development, right? So what? Right? I think that's the most important part of research. What are you going to do with this? So my recommendations for practice, pulled from the literature review and from the research, were that institutions really are the ones that need to put writing in the disciplines initiatives in place, right? We shouldn't be leaving it up to adjunct faculty who have limited time and resources to do so. And then we need to provide them with the faculty development to do it in a way that is preparing our students to not get hit in the face when they enter the workforce, in respect of their time and resources and their needs. Within that faculty professional development, I think sometimes we have a tendency to focus too often on the formal professional development, but those informal moments of mentorship may be providing more to faculty and may do so in a more meaningful way. So those are my recommendations for practice. And then hopefully next year I'll be back to share a little bit more about the recommendations for research, which are up here as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tetloff, and that has application right here at Northwood University, I suspect. So thank you for sharing your research, and also thank you to our other faculty presenters, Dr. McCormick, Dr. Hoiker, and Dr. Tokarev, and our doctors-to-be, our very brave doctoral students. Thank you for sharing your research as it stands. Dr. To-be Story, Dr. To-be Doye. We are so glad that you joined us today. Next week, we have a undergraduate student research presentation at the same time, same place. So we hope that you'll mark your calendars to join us for that as well. This concludes our third annual faculty and staff and now doctoral student symposium on research. And we are thrilled you've joined us. It's truly a celebration, and it's truly a gift for you to share your research and the areas in which you're very passionate. We will have a reception in the lobby here for those who've joined us in person. If you joined us remotely and aren't too far away, you can join us next time in person and enjoy the cookies and other snacks that we have. But we are really pleased to be able to continue this tradition, start a new one next week. And once again, thank you all. Have a great evening.